everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back with another test disc, part 2 of Free and Free Extreme, which I've already done part 1 on the channel. So if you want to check that out and dive into my kind of insights into the extras and my thoughts on those 3 individual shorts, it is available on the channel. This is the follow-up 2 years later, released in 2004, called Free Extreme. And there's a reason for this, because you got some heavy hitters and some bigger, more extreme concepts this time around. Definitely kind of going from the ghost tale, cautionary tales, to the more shocking, creepy as hell, disturbing and psychological a lot more, with some big directors involved in this one. This is the one that I think everyone talks about, and Free is kind of like the one that's came after from the looks of it. I'll dive into that soon, but yeah, this is the follow-up test disc, which I have Free Extreme, coming out on the 20th of October 2025 from Arrow Video. Definitely shaping up to be a must-own get for Halloween season, spooky season. You know, if you like your kind of anthology films, you like horrors, if you like foreign cinema in terms of Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwanese, this is definitely the one to get for sure in terms of that edition. So just like before, I'll be diving into all 3 shorts and the individual directors and my thoughts and impressions on them, while also giving you some insight into the special features on the second disc. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive straight into Free Extremes.
你個極品係咩嚟㗎？你俾啲咩我食啊？
So we're going to start off with Free Extremes with the first volume, Hong Kong Cinema, Fruit Chang's Dumplings, which is wow. Before we get into that, the director I'm not really hugely familiar with. I have seen Heart of the Dragon, which is a Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung collaboration. He did Made in Hong Kong, which I haven't actually got around to watching yet, which is one of his first films, I believe. More art house, kind of, you know, about the youth and growing up in Hong Kong, and he's more in that scene from what I understand of that director. I've always heard of this director, Fruit Chang, and he's more of an artistic kind of indie filmmaker that can do contemporary based films, but more working with new talent in terms of kind of, you know, actors and kind of, you know, cinematographers and things like that. And this was a good chance for him to do something a bit more commercial, something a bit more kind of freeing and, you know, having a bit of fun doing it alongside. And he was the last minute replacement, happens again in this one, from another director that dropped out last minute because of another project. So he came in, was given a week to basically find a script, a short film that he could adapt for about the 35 to 40 minute marker, give or take. And he adapted a short story written by Lillian Lee, which is a bit of a staple kind of novelist, screenplay writer. She's been involved in quite a few big Hong Kong movie and then being adapted into a screenplay for films. I think Rogue was one of hers, Green Snake, if I'm not mistaken, and collaborated with Fruit Chang on this one to create a version of this short story that she made into basically a segment for this kind of anthology film. And it is mind-blowing. There's lots to say about this one. Dumplings, in terms of the short itself, let's just start with that, is awesome. It's a really cool, fantastic little introduction. It's definitely very category free, essentially, I guess, in terms of a Hong Kong angle. Basically, the setup for Dumplings is a little bit obvious in terms of what you're going in for. This is more my jam. Follow this aging actress, this woman who's come to this bottom end of Hong Kong, and she's heard about these very expensive delicacy dumplings that basically she goes and has a meal every so often for. And it's the idea of having these dumplings will grant you youth, and it will make your skin a lot nicer, and it'll make you glow more. And, you know, she's someone who has had her 5 minutes of fame. She's no longer kind of in the spotlight anymore. Her husband doesn't really care, and, you know, she's seeking something to make her feel youthful again. And there is something in these dumplings that will help alongside that. So you've got 2 women, you've got one buying, one selling, and the way information is presented, the way the characters are expressing themselves is great as well. You've got the fantastic cinematographer, Christopher Doyle, which is known behind, you know, a lot of the Wong Kar-wai movies. Just legendary cinematographer. If you get him involved in your Hong Kong movie, you're going to get a really fucking good looking film. And it's exactly what he did. He made a really stylistic, really kind of engaging film. You know, being the fact there were a lot of people just sitting down, talking. There's a lot of expressions in terms of eating dumplings, and just the horror and uncomfortable nature of the atmosphere is spot on perfect. And I think the cinematographer does an amazing job in bringing that out. In terms of the kind of the picture, the visual side of it, while the director is kind of keeping everything in the right line. And I think Fu Chang does a great job in this in terms of making about the characters and making about the situation, because something I will absolutely agree with in terms of Peter Chang's kind of little extras he talks about on both discs, and it essentially is, all these shorts are about something, horror is about something. You can just have a, jump fest or a gore fest, whatever you want, yeah, sure, but the best horrors are the ones you invested in, the ones you care about. We care about Halloween and Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, because of her situation, because of her innocence in that situation. We're like screaming Sydney for that situation because he keeps coming back and keeps getting fucking terrorized by ghost faces. Horror is about characters, about people, and it has to be about something to really get invested. And I think the horror aspect of this isn't necessarily about the gore or the violence. There's a little bit in there, but not much. It's about what these characters are doing, and it is disturbing, it's very gross. For a short, I think it's really well handled, great performances, amazing cinematography, the scoring is on point, the atmosphere, the uncomfortable nature of it, and the gross factor is more in your head, psychological, I guess, more than what's on display. There is some, again, a little bit of violence in places, but more suggestive, and obviously a lot more kind of how far you're willing to go. Very much of the substance, I guess, of 2025. It's a fantastic 42-minute extra with Fu Chang talking about his experience making this and adapting the short story, and then finding out the actual feature film of this, because there is a feature film that came out a year after this, same title, same actresses and people. I was thinking, okay, is that a completely different film? Because I'm curious to see, they made it so close. It actually is, it was filmed at the same time. So essentially what Fu Chang did, took the same budget, had all the same resources, had 2 extra days, and essentially made a feature-length film of this idea, and also made changes and alterations for the short compared to the feature. So you're essentially getting the same film, but with different experience. The ending's different from both one. I don't know what the other ending is on the feature film, which I'm quite curious about, but there is some more subplots, there is changes, there's more scenes. So essentially he made a feature film of the same concept with a lot of similar footage, but also changing it up, making it quite a different experience, so you're not shortchanged or feeling lazy, essentially, in his own words. So it makes sense how they managed to do a feature film so quickly and such a quick concession, because they did both the short and the feature at the exact same time. That's showing that this idea had legs. It's showing that this concept could stand a feature film, a 90-minute film. Bit of a shame they didn't include it as an extra. This could have been maybe like a triple build, maybe that would be a bit more expensive. I'm not too sure, depending on how the Dumplings was released, but I don't think it's got a good release anyway. I think it might have a US release only, but hopefully maybe Arrow might do a separate edition. But shame it wasn't like a triple bill, kind of like, having the 2 kind of frees and then having Dumplings alongside it. So I definitely will be looking into Dumplings and doing a follow-up in terms of that kind of review as well, and seeing if there's any differences that I can see on my experiences with that short and that feature. Yeah, great start to 3 Extremes.
이 자리에서 사람 하나 죽이라면 죽일 수 있겠슈? 이른감이 있다는 생각 안 들어요? 당신 뜻대로 해줄게.
The second short on this one is called Cut, directed by the legendary Korean director Park Chan-wook, which is one of my all-time favorite directors of anything in terms of horror thrillers. Definitely one of the reasons why I got into foreign cinema. As mentioned before in the part 1, one of the big directors that really kind of changed the game for me. Old boy owes everything in terms of my Hong Kong and journey going into that kind of stuff, and Korean cinema was definitely my outlet for the longest time. Yeah, big fan of this director, and him doing a short film on this kind of anthology I thought was a nice treat. Again, seeing something I haven't seen about director, and it features a very familiar actor, Lee Byung-hong, which I hope I said him correctly. Fantastic actor, has been in loads and loads of stuff. I Saw the Devil, The Good, Bad and the Weird. Just incredible actor, most recognizable from Squid Game recently, but done countless work way before that. Just a really good familiar face to kind of show in this one in terms of Cut. And this one I knew nothing about. I was aware of Dumplings in terms of the creepy factor and this more disturbing nature of that one, but this one kind of going in blind. and I got something really surprising, a really good psychological, dark kind of in one location, a bit of a meta kind of film about a filmmaker, director that's making I think a vampire film or something, some sort of horror film, based on the set of his own house. So he has a piano, there's a fireplace, and basically this is a kind of a set that kind of pulls back at the start of the shot, which is really cool. And essentially he gets kidnapped, and basically his wife is basically strung up to this piano, and basically a lot of barbed wires, and basically everything's just kind of glued in, and she's basically just gagged. You've got a little girl on the opposite end in terms of the couch, which has also been tied up, and you've got him also being tied to the wall, and you've got this deranged person, this extra, that's basically demanding a lot of things from him. There's a lot going on in this one in terms of confessions, in terms of kind of desire, secrets, and this idea of the class system, but not really about that, but more case of, you know, I want what's mine. You know, this idea of entitlement, desire, this idea of, you know, how dare you be rich and a good man, you know, how things are represented and shown, and cause and effect, this idea that he was, you know, abused as a kid, and he had bad grades, and he became to be an extra, but he never got that chance to stardom, and he also became a bastard, he of course became a drunk and an abuser, and how this person who's put everyone in the situation has just essentially just snapped, and he threatens our main character by chopping his wife's fingers one by one every 5 minutes until basically he kills the kid, essentially. And there's more going on than just that. There is, again, hidden secrets, truths, very disturbing in terms of where it goes, and leading into some fantastic dialogue, some real nail-biting dialogue, which I think is just really shocking and really kind of explosive, and just kind of gets you locked into this drama, this situation, this pressure cooker. And again, just beautifully well paced, how it's shot, how it uses the set, moments, how the music kind of adds into that, and it's really goddamn intense while having some sort of darkly comedic kind of angle to it as well, which he's known for doing with something like his super dark Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, his very first one, which is super dark, but has some darker kind of comedic comedy in that. And similar to the others, I say as well, he always has an underlying kind of dark sense of humor, and this one has the same kind of thing as well for some of those scenes. And his performance, I think, is just excellent. I think everyone does a really good job in this little short, and you're not sure where it's going to go. It's a bit of a pressure cooker. You know, it's leading up to something quite significant. This was just 1 year after Old Boy, so this was, you know, Park Chan-wook on the top of his game, #1 in terms of Korea, Mr. the King of Korea, as they say in the extras, and just definitely leaves an impression on you by the end for sure. So definitely a strong show, definitely what I would watch again for sure, and adds on to that filmography that we know and love of this director as well. So yeah, just cut. Great little entry for sure in this edition.
眠りたいの違うの見てみたい
何やってるんだ
And the third entry is directed by Takashi Miike, Japanese side this time around, doing a short called Box, which is the concluding of this anthology film. I do have a few of his other films in terms of Audition, One Missed Call, 13 Assassins, the remake. I'm very familiar with this director, and it's interesting. I'll dive more into this on the extra side of it, but the director I've been familiar with for quite some time, a very big influencer, Japanese director that definitely made his statement in the 90s going into the 2000s, definitely offering the audience something quite radical, something quite expressive, very kind of, you know, violent and kind of, you know, horror based, and definitely certain things he's recognizable for. A very recognizable director from his style, from his films, and I've only scratched the surface of that director, so definitely wanted to check out more of him. Again, no expectations going into the box, didn't know what to expect, and to see what he would do to kind of close off this really excellent sequel entry in terms of Three Extremes, and he didn't disappoint. This was a very, again, creepy as hell section from him, very artistic and how it's put together. And something I did appreciate on the extra side is that he didn't do this as a traditional type of horror. He wanted to do something quite different, and it's okay if you don't get what's happened, or it's okay if you don't understand all of it. And I think that's very important to realize, is that not all horror, it has to be clear cut or has to be fully explained. Character piece ones, and you can have your very surreal, kind of strange and uncomfortable movies that are all shorts that can dive into some interesting kind of topics that you can dive into as watching this stuff. And I think this one definitely adds into that in terms of your audience engagement. It's not a crystal clear cut. I do think it is if you're paying attention. I do think if you're familiar with a lot of horror movies and the influence, and I think this is the closest I can compare it to, funny enough though, is the Korean Tale of Two Sisters. I think it's very similar to that. Not just down to the obvious stuff, because it is about two sisters. It has some very similar kind of ideas in terms of a kind of, torture, psychological torture, a ghost aspect to it as well, a regret, a kind of a tone that the film's going for, a beat the film was trying to go for, and I think it's done really well. And essentially what the box is that you've had two sisters that were part of this kind of circus kind of act, and you got this person that basically was looking after them. I don't know if it was the father or someone who just took them in, and basically it's a bit of a circus type thing, and they would do performances together. One of their tricks was going into a box and basically fitting into it essentially and doing those kind of tricks for it. One of the sisters basically got a necklace. The other sister got jealous and basically put her sister in the box while she's rehearsing, locked her in, and then accidentally set the place on fire, basically burning the place down alongside her sister in that box. And that is psychologically tortured her for most of her kind of her life. Essentially, she's 25. The character in this one, she did it when she was quite young, and she writes kind of novels by script, essentially by handwritten, and given it to a publisher, and she basically lives in kind of isolation. She has these really horrible dreams, and it's very surreal. It's very kind of, Mulholland Drive-esque kind of aspect to it. It's really well handled. It's atmospheric as fuck. It's really well kind of, paced. The atmosphere is great. I love the kind of the snow and the kind of the coldness of it, and this idea of kind of, warming up, and obviously fire being the big indicator on this one. Very unnerving in terms of where it goes, and I think it's just a really strong kind of concluding kind of third entry for this and the director, and definitely would later kind of do some similar stuff within Audition, which I think maybe was beforehand anyway. So definitely an established director that knows how to pace his films, his horrors, with One Missed Call and Audition. It was more kind of character-based horror stuff. This was obviously late 2000s, so I believe he definitely was on the money, definitely on point. So there you go, guys. It's been my thoughts and impressions on all three shorts in terms of the Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea side in terms of individual ones they've done. All three are excellent. I think it definitely goes to the extreme for sure. You've got some really hot ticket, big profile directors, some big concepts, doing similar kind of things but different at the same time, and you're getting something quite interesting. Now, in terms of the special features for Disc 2, you're getting that follow-up cross-pollination part 2 with Pia Chang, talking about, again, his experience making and producing these, and him kind of collaborating with those Korean and Japanese directors, and his involvement in the project overall. And I think it was a really good little insight in terms of him being on set with Dumplings, doing the more Hong Kong stuff, and allowing the directors to do their sections and just getting involved a little bit in the casting, a little bit in the scripts, but pretty much allowing them free reign to go and make what they want, and just talking about the model during the time, and then him hinting at potentially trying to do a continuation of some kind or another anthology. But as already alluded to, anthology films are risky. That there's always that kind of risk of one being better than the other, and you asking an audience to sit through a 2-hour film that has maybe one specific one they want to watch, but maybe they don't want to watch the first one or the last one. But I really liked his kind of honesty and his, again, very transparency of making these, and the hardships of kind of putting these things together, and the financial return with his creativity. And I think he's very honest about his producer hat, creative directing on the side of it, and giving some insight into those all three sections. And as mentioned already, there's a fantastic 42-minute extra with Fu Chang, which dives into the entire process of him making the film, modern 2025 extra, and talks about working with the actresses and the script and all aspects of that. So it's a really good, insightful, really kind of deep dive into the kind of the making of Dumplings, and a little bit of kind of a insight also into the feature film and how that was kind of came to be essentially by it. And you've got loads of archival extras on this edition, loads and loads and loads and loads in terms of the making of all three shorts. back from the early 2000s. Loads for Dumplings. You're going to get jam-packed full of insight into Dumpling and a lot of archival extras. You've got a brand new extra of Takashi Miike, which also talks about his involvement with doing box, and basically a very sad sort of interview in a weird way. Him basically being very honest about his kind of, filmography and what he's known for, and he definitely feels like a man that is up to a point where he's still making these films, still enjoying the process of being kind of, established in that kind of scene, but definitely feels very much a reminiscent of his old work, and just, wants to be seen, and his work is basically a reflection of who he is in terms of his passion, his creativity, and he is kind of looking back on his old work, which I think is quite interesting. There is a new audio commentary. I don't know if it's an archival one or it's brand new, but it definitely seems like a brand new audio commentary from Takashi Miike on box, which I think was really cool. Again, alongside loads of archival extras, trailers. It's a real shame we didn't get an extra for Chan-wook. I think that would have been really cool to see what he thinks of the short he did, but there is, again, that archival extra, which gives a little bit more insight, but it's a bit of a shame on that front. But in terms of the special features for both Disc 1 and Disc 2, you're getting every aspect covered. You're getting some really cool insight into the making of all these shorts, including the directors who came back to do brand new interviews. And you're getting some really strong kind of insight into the process of making an anthology and the ambitious nature of doing something that is cross-pollination in terms of different countries coming together to make something quite unique and quite special. So I really enjoyed my time with both these films, and I think it's definitely worth considering and checking out on the 20th of October 2025, part of Arrow Video's brand new release. If you're not too sure still, there is that 7-day free trial on Arrow Video's video player. I believe all of them will be on there around the same time, if not before, maybe after. But definitely worth checking out for October, spooky month, but definitely worth considering picking up for the very reasonable price it's going for on the pre-order right now. Please comment down below. So in time, guys, Amphlett reviews. Signing out.